This is the Financially Simple Podcast, a show dedicated to destroying the complexities of money for today's small business owner. And now, here's your host, pizza-loving, certified financial planner, Justin Goodbread.
Welcome to Financially Simple. I'm your host, Justin Goodbread, and today we're going to begin our deep dive into the subject of building a best-in-class risk management department to grow the maximum value of your company. Today, I want to deal with entity selection. Now, for those of you who follow the podcast from the very beginning, you realize that entities are something that I've dealt with immensely. So today's going to be of a refresher course. And with that, I'm going to tell you to pause it right now or listen to the refresher course if you want the Cliff Notes version. But I did an episode 9 and episode 11 on the podcast, where we talked specifically about building business entities and the 5 types of business structures. And we also dealt with which entities are best for a transition. So today's more of a overview, if you will, more of a refresher. For those of you who've not listened to those, hey, check them out. You may want to check them out on the Financially Simple blog. You can go to a Financially Simple blog and just type in on the search bar, business entities, the 5 types of business structures. I deal with the pros and cons of each of these things in detail. Today, I'm not going to go in that detail because it was like a 40-minute episode on the podcast. And we also had an attorney by the name of Lee Popkin. He's a tax attorney. He's a partner in a law firm that I personally use on a personal level, that I've recommended many people use. And he has a master's in taxation from NYU. I mean, the guy's sharp. One of my dear friends in the professional world. I had him on to talk about here in Tennessee, specifically the Tennessee law, some things that we might encounter. You might want to check that podcast out. But without further ado, let's jump into some basics on entities. So the first thing you have to decide on is, are you going to operate your business as a sole proprietor, as a company? Well, at this point, more than likely, you've determined that. Maybe you've been operating as a sole proprietor, which is where you'll file your details on a Schedule C. Maybe that's what you've been operating. You're really just kind of a doing business at. Well, there's some pros and cons to that, and I'm challenging you to go back and listen to those podcasts. But what I want to deal with today is more important than just operating as a sole proprietorship. You may say, well, look, I want to operate as a general partnership. A general partner is where you go into business with maybe a friend, a family member, a colleague, somebody who has offsetting skill set. The IRS calls this type of business what they call a relationship business. It's really not an entity. More of a relationship business. It's actually not even a business, it's a partnership. So I would say that I really don't even want to focus on the partnership. Instead, we want to look at that if you've set your companies up as a C corporation, as a subchapter S corporation, or potentially even as a limited liability company, often referred to as an LLC, then there are some things that you want to make sure that you are doing within your company to help mitigate some risk. So as you're setting up your entities, and I'm going to refer to entities now as that Schedule C, as that subchapter S corporation, or as a limited liability company. And there's all sorts of flavors and there's variations depending on which state that you're in. I mean, you may have a PLLC or a PC. I mean, there's all sorts of variations, but we're going to run those as the backbone of today's conversation. And I want to deal with just some basic common sense things that will help you minimize some risk to your business. The first thing I'm going to tell you is hire a good attorney. You'll probably hear me say that throughout every area as we dive into this risk management area. I'm going to tell you to hire a good attorney. Now, what a good attorney is going to do is they're going to make sure that your documents which govern your businesses are up to snuff, are best as they can in alignment with the jurisdiction laws to whom you operate. So, for example, if you're in East Tennessee, if you're in a Tennessee company, an LLC, or S Corp or C Corp, then the attorney will make sure that the agreements, that the governing documents are up to par. So governing documents are often referred to as an operating agreement. That's one thing that you often hear. So, for example, let's talk about the LLC, because I just was dealing with this today. In an LLC, depending on how it's positioned, you're more than likely going to have an operating agreement that tells people how the company is to be operated. It's going to identify people like a tax member, like the CEO, your key people in the company, your owners, your members, your shareholders, depending on what type of structure you are. It's going to identify the way you deal with conflict. If there's an arbitration clause, if there's not an arbitration clause, it's going to deal with the way compensation is provided to officers. It may deal with non-competes, non-solicits amongst shareholders or members. So the operating agreement is really at the heart of how the company or the business operates. And so this is where you need a good attorney to review your operating agreement. And a question was asked here recently, well, Justin, how often should I have my company operating agreement reassessed? I'm going to tell you to do it as frequently as you feel is needed. So we started Heritage Investors back in 2009. This is our registered investment advisory company. And again, just because you're registered doesn't mean the SEC's approved or any of that stuff. There's all sorts of disclosures to go with it. But we're a registered investment advisor company with the state of Tennessee. And as a registered investment advisor, we have to have an operating agreement. Well, when we launched the company back in 2009, Heritage Investors wasn't a registered investment advisor. We were working in the broker world. And I had a partner to whom I've since purchased out. And now I have another partner involved in my wife. And so I felt like after all the transitions and everything that it was time for me, some almost 10 years later, 9 years later, actually, for me to revamp and make sure the operating agreement is up to par with current laws. It didn't cost a lot of money, but it was something that I felt was needed. Well, whenever I did that, I realized that my meeting minutes, the minutes that I was taking from our organization during our business meetings, were never filed or were not combined. I had detailed notes on. I had notes. I wouldn't say they're detailed compared to probably how they should be, but I had notes on what we talked about, but I didn't have the notes combined. So just that little exercise made me realize that I was missing some stuff, especially from 2018 last year. And so when I reviewed the operating agreement, I found out that I was not in compliance with our state rules.
You are listening to Financially Simple, destroying the complexities of money for today's small business owner.
So let me ask you the question. When's the last time you looked at your entity's operating agreement? It's just, I don't know what that is. Well, now may be a time for you to talk to a good attorney. Now may be the time for you to meet with your planner and see if the agreement is current based on other agreements they've seen. Remember, your planner cannot act as a lawyer. They cannot practice law. They can practice business. And what we're talking about is the business structure. You may want to show it to your planner and see if there's some ideas that can be incorporated into the partnership agreement. So, for example, we created a board of trustees this last time I amended it. I wouldn't say trustee, board of advisors is the way I would have to say it for the LLC. We created a board of advisors, and that board of advisors is going to help me give direction on the company. And for that, I'll pay them. And that's okay. So you may want to just review the company's operating agreement. That would be the very first thing I would say when you look at the entity selection. Make sure the operating agreement is filed or is in good order. Another thing you may want to check, and I've seen this happen a couple of times in my career, is to make sure all your fees have been paid to the jurisdiction where you're currently registered or domiciled. So in Tennessee, we have to pay an annual filing report. Basically, it's a tax, but it's a filing report that lets the state of Tennessee know what the details of our company is. That way, it's a public record. And if you fail to do that, then you could go into a dissolution issue to where your company is null and void. I was serving as an expert witness on a case where the company let their annual filing report lapse. And the company was defunct. They could get it reinstated, but here we are in a lawsuit trying to defend the company, and they weren't even a legitimate company at that point. So we had to get all that corrected so we could continue and defend the lawsuit, et cetera, et cetera. So you may want to just check with your state to make sure everything's been in compliance. Whenever you're dealing with entity selection, if you will focus on state compliance, if you'll focus on your operating agreement and focus on those documents which your jurisdiction requires you to have, then you can, I wouldn't say rest assured, but with a good, competent attorney's oversight and a good plan in place, you can make sure that you have some protection there, which will help your company long term. Now, I'm going to give you one last tip here as we wrap this particular episode up. Please, 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 please do not, the word is co-mingle, co-mingle, co-mingle. Please do not commingle your personal expenses with the company's expenses. I was in an expert witness case where this in fact happened. And I was asked to go through the budget and show where the proprietor, the business owner, in this case, it was an S corporation, so we'll call them the shareholder. One of the key shareholders was using the company to cover personal expenses and vice versa. It was basically an open checkbook between their personal assets and the company asset. They hadn't had a very good system in place to where they were taking paychecks from the S corporation to their personal checking account and only living out of their personal checking account. Instead, they were treating the company as their personal checking account. In this particular case, the attorney, who I knew very well, actually was the prosecuting attorney, or I wouldn't say prosecuting, they were attorney representing the plaintiff, was able to pierce the corporate veil. And so that's a term you may not be familiar with in the professional world. We hear it all the time. So in a nutshell, think of a veil. Think of a protection between one side to the other. You know, the veil that comes to my mind, I have two that come to my mind readily. In the Old Testament, in the Bible, they talk about the veil in the temple, and it was protect the people who were not the high priest from God's presence. And so they had a veil there. And then as the Bible records, when Christ was crucified, the veil, which was this huge mammoth cloth, was ripped from the top to bottom, thus eliminating that. Another veil you may think of is the veil that would be in front of a bride's face. So it's something that you can protect. So in that idea, the old tradition is you put the veil in front of the face and you're not allowed to, quote, kiss the bride, or you're not allowed to see the bride's full beauty until you say, I do. And then when you unveil the bride, you now glimpse the full beauty of the bride, and you may kiss the bride, so to speak. If you're male or female, it doesn't really matter. Those are the ideas behind the veil. And so the veil is no more than a protection. It's a covering, if you will. And so whenever you operate the company and your personal assets as one and the same, you're allowing a plaintiff to come in and say that the corporation is not there to actually provide protection against your personal assets. And that's what happened in this case. The proprietor of that company allowed, due to very poor money management, the plaintiff's attorney to pierce the corporate veil. And then he, the proprietor, became personally liable for the damages as saw fit by the court. So if you're operating as a company, one of the things outside of your operating agreements and having your minutes in place, like stock certificates, all those things in order, which an attorney can help you with, you then want to make good practice that you're not going to co-mingle. You're going to treat the entity as its own, quote, living, breathing being. You're not going to treat it as you. And that's hard to do. So in an entity selection, those are some things that you may want to consider. And as you consider, well, how are we going to operate? That helps the attorney and that helps the planner navigate which entity selection you may choose. So I wanted to give those quick tidbits to you, and I want to challenge you to check out the Financially Simple blog post. I've got 2 of them on there. If you search, you're going to pull up like 7 articles on entities, and you'll hear my friend Lee Popkin go into detail on various entities and pros and cons from an attorney's perspective and some nightmare stories he's heard. You'll read the pros and cons, especially in the article, and it's rather lengthy. I mean, it's probably, it could be a small book, but the article is titled Business Entities, the 5 Types of Business Structures. And we'll put a link to this in the show notes so you can go on over and see that. And on the blog post that corresponds with this particular episode, we'll also have a link in that blog post to reference this particular post I've done in the past. So I don't want to repeat myself and go through all the details on the various entity selections and tell you the pros and cons. I've already done that. I wanted to give you those couple of tidbits right now. As you're thinking about value, you want to make sure your entities are bulletproof. And so there's a couple of quick tips to help you make your entities bulletproof. So with that, guys, I'm going to wrap it up. I say it every week, except for last week. I say it every week that life is hard, life is good, and life can be frustrating, but money doesn't have to be. This entity stuff, guys, a good attorney will save you a world. I know both male and female attorneys who are rock stars in this area, and they can identify within a few seconds how to protect you. So a good attorney is worth their weight in gold. You've heard me say it over and over and over again. Don't try to shortcut yourself here. But life can be frustrating. It doesn't have to be. Guys, let's continue to make our lives at least financially simple. Y'all go out and create a wonderful day.
You have been listening to the Financially Simple podcast. The information in this show is for informational purposes only. This show is not investment advice. Instead, seek help from a competent financial advisor. Justin Goodbread, CFP, is an investment advisor representative of Heritage Investors, a registered investment advisor.